Princess Bride feels medieval, but if you tried to pin it to a year, a country, a century, it would kind of all fall apart. That isn't a mistake, it's the point. Today, I'm breaking down the costumes from The Princess Bride, designed by Phyllis Dalton. What they borrow from real medieval clothing, what they invent, and why those choices make this film work better than most movies that try to be historically accurate. By the end, you'll see why this fantasy is actually more honest about the Middle Ages than most prestige period dramas. Phyllis Dalton was one of the greatest historical costume designers of the 20th century. She won 2 Academy Awards and worked on the costume design for Dr. Zhivago, Lawrence of Arabia, and Henry V. Lawrence of Arabia required 35,000 individual pieces of costume. You've got to understand, this was back in the day when there was no CGI, there was no color correction, editing software. Every extra you see on screen had to be dressed by hand. That gives you a sense of the scale that Dalton used to work on. She specialized in historical worlds that felt textured, populated, and real. She wasn't just designing for the camera, she was designing for entire societies. So when Dalton came to The Princess Bride, she wasn't guessing at what medieval Renaissance looked like, she knew. Which means when she bends historical accuracy here, it's actually for a purpose. It's not a mistake in her design. Now you can see that most clearly when we look at Buttercup. So the story takes place in Florin and Gilda. It's a fairy tale version of Europe. Visually, the costumes borrow heavily from Western Europe around the mid-15th century. You see long gowns, layered robes, fitted doublets, cloaks and hoods that feel late medieval. But nothing is locked to one decade. One character might look 1450 and another character might look 1550. This is not museum medieval, this is more theatrical medieval. Nowhere is this clearer than in Buttercup's first gown. Buttercup's famous Red Riding dress is shaped like a houppelande. That was a voluminous outer garment, popular from the late 1300s through to the mid 1400s. It was a status garment worn over layers, made from huge amounts of fabric. You can actually see in her sleeves, she's got this beautiful cartridge pleating around the cuff, which is a historical construction technique, pleating technique, where fabric is gathered into kind of rounded pleated folds. So you see this both on menswear and women's wear at the time, and it kind of gathers fabric without stiffness. So the pleats in her skirt, the high collar, the long hanging sleeves, all echo late medieval court fashion. But then you start seeing modern logic and dressmaking coming into the design. Her gown actually laces up at the back. A real houppelande wouldn't have needed that. A belt would be enough to get it on and off. It would be quite an open design over the head with a belt wrapped around the waist.
Buttercup's back lacing is historically medieval in itself, but it has been applied to a high-waisted, pleated, romantic kind of bodice, whose cut comes from a much later fashion. So, the gown ends up mixing a 15th century fastening system with an 18th to 19th century silhouette in a way that never actually existed in real historical dress. Now, if you want to make the Buttercup red dress for yourself, you can actually use a couple of my patterns to do this. First is my Odette pattern, which usually sits just below the knee, but all you really need to do is lengthen the skirt length. Then you just need to add on Princess Buttercup's belt, and it looks pretty good. Now, the main feature of the Odette is it's got beautiful darts in the bodice and around the sleeve head, so that gives it a really beautiful kind of romantic feel and captures those pleats that are in Buttercup's dress, just in a more tailored format. Another option is my Audrey pattern, which you just need to lengthen the body length and add a belt on top of that, and it already looks pretty similar again. Now, the sleeves of the Audrey are really voluminous anyway and actually have some shirring on the cuff, so you wouldn't even really need to do the cartridge pleating, you could just do the shirring, and it's a lot more comfortable, it's quite easy to do, and it kind of has that effect perfectly of Buttercup's cartridge pleated cuffs on her sleeves. Now another sleeve option is the Freya sleeve, which comes from my Freya pattern, but also my Sleeve Studio pattern, which contains 3 different sleeve designs. Now you can add those sleeves onto any set-in sleeve, so it's really a romantic style of sleeve. It's got 3 sections of elastic that kind of create those puffy sections, super comfortable, and gives really that medieval feel that you see in this movie, but also in Ever After. And it's pretty perfect for this dress. Then you just need to add your belt, and that is already looking so much like Buttercup. It's gorgeous. Now fabric wise, I think the original is really made from silk, but you could use a really beautiful drapey viscose, especially in a satin or twill weave. It would be nice and shiny, but also really drapey. So check out the description box and I'll link all my patterns there.
Her hair is quite loose and down, but with a pearl fitted cap. Now medieval noblewomen almost always had their hair covered, but loose hair reads as youthful and romantic to more modern audiences. So the film keeps that in. Her other dresses lean more Italian in shape, with that higher waistline that was kind of like later known as the Empire waistline. And these give her a more soft kind of romantic silhouette. Now there's a gown later in the film that has this beautiful kind of cape overlay, which is made in Devore or a burnout velvet. Now that is a modern fabric that is made by applying chemicals to a particular design in the fabric. That chemical then melts the pile fibers and leaves the sheerness next to the design that has been taken out with chemicals. So that's actually more of a modern fabric. So it isn't medieval, but it reads as luxurious and textured on camera, almost to a point where you could have believed that it did exist back then. There is also a long-running debate about how fitted medieval dresses actually were. Some scholars point to Greenland, where there are some remaining medieval dresses that do seem to be more fitted and show shaped seams. Others, like Robin Netherton, claim that the shaping came more so from clever cutting than modern darts.
Just to put that debate in context, Greenland didn't invent fitted dresses. What Herolfsness gives us is some of the best surviving medieval examples of panelled body-shaped gowns, because the cold preserved them. Those dresses show seams, gauze, and careful cutting that follow the body without relying on belts or folding. But that tailoring came from mainland Europe. And if you zoom out even further, shaping fabric to the body is much older. Ancient Egyptian sheath dresses, Minoan bodices, and Chinese wrapped and cut garments all created close fits long before medieval Europe. So what we're really seeing in Greenland is medieval tailoring in action, not its birth.
Either way, Buttercup's gowns look more medieval in spirit, but are built with modern construction habits. Colour is really important. Buttercup does wear red at the start, but she then also wears lots of pale blues and pale pinks. But historically, these colours would have been more rich and deep. Pale pastels read to modern audiences as soft and romantic, but medieval dyes were vivid and did not wash out easily. And this leads straight into the question of colour and class. One of the biggest myths around medieval clothing is that poor people wore browns and earth tones all the time. That isn't true. From my Ever After costume review video that I did previously, a lot of people commented around the fact that there is this myth that poor people could only afford earth and tone dyes because they were made from natural things such as plants, insects, bark, and shellfish. But poor people absolutely had access to an array of colours, which a lot of people mentioned in the comments as well. So woad produced a beautiful blue colour, and that was widely available. The beautiful thing about woad is that it actually has an inbuilt mordant, which is what keeps the dye in the fabric and it doesn't fade. Madder made red, weld made yellow. Now, what separated the rich from the poor when it comes to fabric dyes wasn't actually the colour itself. Everyone had access to the colour. It was about how long the colour lasted. So as I said, most dyes need mordants for the colour to really stick to the actual fibre and to stay bright wash after wash. Mordants cost money.
The rich used alum. Alum was imported, taxed, and controlled by merchant guilds, so only elites could afford it. That one mineral is what gave medieval nobles those glowing scarlets, clear blues, and sharp greens you see in manuscripts and royal clothing. Poor people didn't have alum. They used iron from rusted nails, oak bark, and even fermented urine. Those mordants turn the exact same dyes into brown, grey, or muddy colours, and they fast fade too. So when you see nobles in bright red and peasants in dull brown, that isn't costume cliche, that's chemistry. Class was literally baked into the cloth.
Woad is obviously the exception. It has that kind of inbuilt mordant, and that's why blue is so common across all classes. So yes, medieval people were more colourful than we imagine, but the deep, stable, saturated jewel tones that really stayed vibrant belonged to those who could afford proper dyeing, mordants, and then also proper care and washing of the fabrics. Head coverings mattered too. Coifs, veils, hoods, and wimples were worn by almost everyone. Actually knocking off someone's hat was an insult. The Princess Bride simplifies this. People go bareheaded and colours are controlled so characters read cleanly on the screen. Now let's look at how men's clothes tell the stories. Wesley's black outfit feels more pirate swashbuckler than medieval. His fitted jacket, boots, and mask lean closer to the 16th and 17th century. It also gave me Zorro kind of like Billy Zane Phantom vibes as well. Now Prince Humperdinck's outfit is built around an ornamented doublet. Now that doublet is brilliant. The sleeve specifically, how it has the kind of slit down the sleeve, and he can kind of either wear his hand through it like a cape, or he can then pull it in and put it through the cuff, depending on what he's doing and the kind of look that he wants to go for. So it kind of makes the garment adaptable and theatrical while still signalling wealth and power. Inigo and Fezzik wear simpler jerkins and tunics that obviously prioritize movement and character over accuracy. But every silhouette already tells you who these men are before they start talking. In medieval Europe, sumptuary laws regulated what people could wear. Silks, furs, and trims signal class. The film purposefully ignores this. Characters wear what suits the storyline. The fabrics are too clean, the stitching is machine made, the boots are modern, and the armour kind of mixes centuries. These rules are broken, so the visuals serve more of a narrative rather than archaeology. Very few medieval garments have survived. Historians rely on bog finds, manuscripts, tomb effigies, artworks, tapestries, wills, and inventories. The artists weren't always accurate either, so later reconstructions kind of distort this idea, and the terminology is always shifting. Medieval clothing history is still kind of being built garment by garment as we learn more. The Princess Bride uses costume as vocabulary, not grammar. It borrows shapes, textures, and social cues, then kind of rearranges them to suit the storyline and the narrative. So it isn't accurate, but it is intelligent for what the purpose of the story is. Now, if you like this deep dive, head back and watch my Ever After review, as it's another way of looking at how fantasy films use clothing to kind of signal power.